Maryland rental laws cover the ins and outs of lease agreements and rent-related issues, from rules that dictate how evictions should be handled to the rights and responsibilities of landlords and tenants. Understanding these rental laws is crucial in making sure your tenancy proceeds without a hitch. In this video, we'll give you an overview of what the state law says about lease agreements, required disclosures, security deposits, and evictions. We're eForms, the largest online database of fillable legal forms. Check out the link below to access a fillable lease agreement template. Let's first go over the basics. What's a lease agreement? A lease agreement is a rental contract between a landlord and a tenant. Depending on the type of agreement, whether it's a month-to-month lease, a standard agreement, or rent-to-own, both the landlord and tenant are bound to the specific terms regarding the length of the lease, termination, and more. Because a lease agreement is legally binding once it's signed, breaking the contract can result in hefty fines or even legal action. Next, let's look at required disclosures. In Maryland, there are a total of 6 disclosures that the landlord must provide to the tenant. Agent-landlord identification. If anyone is authorized to enter the premises and act on behalf of the landlord, their identity must be disclosed to the tenant in the lease agreement. Move-in, move-out checklist. The tenant must be notified of their right to have the landlord inspect the unit in their presence to make a checklist of all existing damages at the start of the tenancy. The tenancy must make requests by certified mail within 15 days of the tenant's occupancy. Security deposit receipt. The landlord is legally required to provide the tenant with a receipt if a security deposit was accepted. The receipt must also list the tenant's rights with regard to the security deposit. Habitability. The landlord must include a statement in the lease agreement that states the property is in a habitable condition. The disclosure must also detail the tenant's responsibilities with regard to other utilities and necessary repairs. Ratio utility billing system disclosure. If the landlord uses a ratio utility billing system which distributes a property's utility costs equally among tenants regardless of individual usage, they must make a disclosure to the tenant. Lead-based paint disclosure. If the residence was built on or prior to 1978, the landlord must inform the tenant of potentially dangerous lead within the rental's walls and ceilings. Now, let's take a closer look at security deposit laws. In Maryland, the landlord is legally allowed to ask for a maximum of 2 months' rent from a new tenant. As for returning the security deposit back to the tenant, the landlord must send the funds within 45 days from the lease termination date. If there are itemized deductions, the landlord must provide documentation and a detailed statement of costs to justify the deductions. Finally, let's cover Maryland's eviction laws. In Maryland, a landlord may evict a tenant under the following requirements. Non-payment of rent. If the tenant is late on rent, the landlord can issue a 10-day notice to quit. This means the tenant has 10 days to pay the owed amount in full or move out. Non-compliance. If the tenant breaks any portion of the lease other than late rent, the landlord can issue a 30-day notice to quit. This gives the tenant 30 days to fix the violation or be evicted. Imminent danger. If a tenant poses a risk of imminent danger of harm to self, others, or the property, the landlord can issue a 14-day notice to quit. Termination. If the landlord wants to terminate a month-to-month lease for reasons other than non-payment or non-compliance, they must provide 60 days notice to the tenant. Want to learn more about Maryland rental laws? Visit the link in the video description for a comprehensive breakdown on all things related to lease agreements, evictions, and more.